With the beginning of the new year comes the Lunar New Year, an occasion for families. On this day, families meet up, cook delectable food, and live it up. Yet 32-year-old Jihad is unsettled. She is a jobless specialist, however most would agree that she is jobless as she is cooking for the visitors who still can't seem to show up. Her mom is watching a charming video of her grandson, yet Gia is bothered that they are hindering her and eating the food she prepared before everybody shows up. When she proposes that her folks ought to cook the food since they are eating it, Gia's mom advises her that cooking is the least she could do since she inhabits home and doesn't actually pay least. Gia's sister Jaimun shows up with her family and her mom embraces her granddaughter. Jimin's significant other is conveying the grandson, and Jimin is depleted from the excursion and needs to plunk down. Gia shows up out of the shadows to welcome her younger sibling with a practically phony grin. Gia says she is glad to see her and gives her a bloom print cover. Jimin answers by taking note of that the cover looks perfect on Gia and imprints a relationship status by saying all she wants to do currently is stroll down the walkway. However, Gia doesn't find the joke entertaining. She demands Jimin puts on the cover to assist her cook with a dead articulation. Gia's mother isn't dazzled and hits her. Gia simply needs another person to cook, yet Jimin's significant other brings up that Jimin is worn out enough as is proposing she is pregnant with the third youngster. This is large information for the family, and they begin eating. Not long after, Gia is outside smoking and furious at her sister for her life and recommending she meet with a person. She realizes she is splashing is interfered with by an obscure man who remarks on Gia actually having a profane demeanor. This man is eating chicken bosom in a smoking region, which confounds Gia. The man uncovers that his name is Minkyil Jean and that he used to live nearby and wear earphones a ton. Gia at first doesn't recollect him, however at that point understands that he used to be an excessively skinny gamer. Youngster Minkyil didn't think he changed that much, however, yet Gia demands that he changed a ton and notes that him eating chicken bosom in a smoking region abnormal. Mitchell makes sense of he is here since his family wasn't content with him not eating the Lunar New Year food since they had an excessive number of calories. Gia reviews that Minkyil is 32 years of age. Very much like her, they used to live in a similar structure and were cherished companions, yet not by decision. Minkyil was the bashful youngster that didn't coexist with anybody in class, yet Gia doesn't see the point in thinking back and is considering the way in which Minkyil changed such a lot of. She reasons that the city life transformed him and he is presently a collaborator, supervisor, developer at a notable organization and appears to carry on with a good life. Gia looks at Minkyil to her life where she continually gets chastened at home and is jobless and is stunned that Minkyil is showing improvement over her. She begins to mope once more, yet Minkyil intrudes on her and asks how she is doing. Gia redirects the inquiry and Mitchell says that he's recently been residing and keeping in mind that he believes he's doing extraordinary. His folks think in any case his folks have been pestering him to get hitched and, surprisingly, pursued a dating administration with a enlistment expense of $5,000. Minkyil expects Gia isn't experiencing the same thing, yet she is. Then Jesus proposes that they get hitched. Minkyil is stunned and Gia makes sense of that since their folks are irritating them to get hitched. They ought to simply get hitched to fix the issue. It would be a mutually beneficial situation. 2G is shocked. Mitchell asks Gia's father for his approval and they get hitched. They go to a tropical area for their wedding trip, and keeping in mind that she is drinking on the main evening of her special first night, she at long last acknowledges what just happened. She is stunned that she's not in a fantasy and is no other nation hitched to Minkyil. Gia and Minkyil are currently preparing for bed and Mitchell is scanning through his bag for something that would make their most memorable night together great. Gia expects that he is looking at something grimy and gets humiliated, saying she isn't prepared. Shockingly, Minkyil hands her earplugs. He says that occasionally he wheezes and afterward falls asleep. When Mitchell begins wheezing, Gia utilizes the earplugs and falls asleep, taking note of that. Minkyil is exceptionally viable and arranged the following day. Gia is worried that her blissful special first night can be shocking, assuming they begin battling as Gia is cautiously picking her garments. Minkyil shows up in unfashionable yet open to attire and asks how much longer Gia will take. He is in any event wearing socks with shoes. Mitchell inquires as to whether it is important, and Jesus says it does on the grounds that she will be looking since their timetable isn't tight. They go garments shopping. While Gia has barely any familiarity with style, she thought something else would be better. She was off base. Mitchell turns out in a red and blue outfit with suspenders. His legitimization is that the varieties are brilliant so he will not get hit by a vehicle. Gia gives him a shirt and jeans to attempt, and she says they look pleasant to her. Mitchell continues to request the representative for 7 sets from the outfit. Gia is shocked, however Mitchell expresses that since it looks great he ought to have a few of them. Gia chooses to select a couple of new outfits so he can pivot between them while she is looking. Mitchell sees the bathing suits. This prompts him to inquire as to whether he would be able to choose a bathing suit for her for their banana boat ride. Gia trees automatically yet is humiliated when she understands what he asked. Gia and Mitchell got done with shopping and are making a beeline for the shore, yet Gia is as yet humiliated that Mitchell selected her bathing suit. She is committed to wear it at their next action and doesn't actually have the foggiest idea what sort of bathing suit he purchased. Gia thinks he purchased a hot one, yet that was not the case. Mitchell got her a wetsuit to match his. To Mitchell, this was the most ideal decision since they are agreeable and protected, yet to Gia his decision is humiliating on the grounds that this is their special first night and every other person is in swimming outfits and swim shorts. She was worried that it would be excessively hot. Shockingly, the wetsuit was truly agreeable. The two lived it up on the banana boat, eating and taking pictures around the day's end. Gia and Mitchell were strolling near the ocean. Gia believes that should do however much as could be expected on the grounds that the excursion was costly. Yet Mitchell is worried that Gia is worn out and brings up a physical issue on her heel. Gia was excessively up to speed in the enjoyable to see it. Mitchell offers to give Gia a piggyback ride since strolling on a harmed heel should hurt. Gia is reluctant in view of the timetable, yet she ultimately bounces on Mitchell's back. Gia is humiliated and inquires as to whether she is weighty. Mitchell brings up how her weight makes it a decent exercise, and Gia is irritated by this. As they are going, Gia feels solace from Mitchell's back. Gia sees how wonderful the dusk is and demands they snap a photo. Mitchell doesn't have any desire to. Yet, Gia says that they should live at the time. Back at the lodging, Gia is taking a gander at the image and recollects her sister saying that couples regularly battle on their special first night. However, Gia and Mitchell didn't battle and they had loads of tomfoolery, yet Gia is as yet humiliated about being on Mitchell's wide warm back. This feeling rapidly disappears as she sees Mitchell resting. She is happy with the outing. Back in Korea, Gia's mother made a great deal of food and pressed boxes to commend her approaching back, thus she can move in with Mitchell. Gia is uneasy, however recalls that she consented to this when she got hitched after the move. Mitchell gives Gia the paper. Gia remembers something irregular about an animation signature tune. The verses were take care of business, do what needs to be done. It's okay to commit errors since you're not a grown-up yet. Gia is simply acknowledging now that this implies that you're in a bad way, assuming that you commit errors as a grown-up. The fact is that since Jesus said they ought to get hitched, her life is spiraled crazy, and presently she is living with Mitchell. Back the paper is a contract for living respectively. Gia is stunned and tosses it on the floor. She acknowledges that they need an agreement and they each compose 3 circumstances. Mitchell's standards are no smoking, don't irritate mouse, and say something in the event that something is off base. Gia's principles or don't go into a room without thumping power nothing and convey assuming something is off base. Gia is shocked about the no smoking guideline. Not even her father could inspire her to stop. However, Mitchell could do without the smell, so he says the smoke with some restraint. Gia asks who Mouse is. Mouse is Mitchell's feline who is presently at Gia's feet. The feline is named Mouse since felines like mice. Gia in the end says she loves feline, yet asks what might occur in the event that she didn't. Mitchell says that he would simply get one more space for Gia to live in. Cash wouldn't be an issue in light of the fact that Mitchell is significant about marriage. They settle on the other terms and structure an authority contract. Mitchell adds another thing: any party can end the agreement marriage whenever. Gia portends that the Agreement will welcome them many tears and giggles on the primary evening living respectively. Gia chooses to not as yet unload and arrange some furniture. Mincheol returns to work tomorrow and Gia is restless about living with somebody other than her family. Mincheol then again isn't concerned in his gaming. The following day Gia is woken to the sound of Menchie preparing breakfast. Gia is dazzled and chooses to gobble since she's up, yet this feeling immediately disappeared as Mincheol put the fixings into a blender to make a chicken bosom smoothie. Gia thinks it tastes horrible and inquires as to whether they are having anything more. Mincheol says okay, improve her a protein bar. Gia is frantic and grumbles that this isn't genuine food and remarks how Mincheol will have a tasty lunch at work without help from anyone else. Mincheol refutes this by uncovering his sound lunch. Gia thoroughly searches in the cooler for something to eat and it's loaded up with quality food. Gia has a newly discovered appreciation toward her mother's cooking. Seeing Gia like this, Mincheol recommends Gia go out and eat without anyone else. Gia inquires as to whether that is okay and Mincheol says that all he needs is his smoothie. Gia has been in the habit of eating with her family but remembers this is a contract marriage. Mincheol leaves and Jesus says she's going to get a job soon and that she'll see him at dinner. The moment Mitchell leaves, Gia takes back her words and proudly says she's going to stay unemployed until her bank is empty. Mincheol is walking to work and gets into the car of his colleague Sang-Yu Choi. He is surprised that Mitchell suddenly asked him to hand in his request to take 10 days of vacation. Sang-Yu notices that Mincheol is smiling, which he rarely does, and asks if something good happened. Mitchell remembers Gia saying goodbye to him and he responds by saying it's nice knowing someone is waiting for you at home. Sang-Yu is confused but Mincheol clarifies that his wife is at home. Sang-Yu is shocked. He thinks Mitchell is messing with him until Mincheol confirms he got married last week. When they get to work, everyone is congratulating Mincheol and he hands them souvenirs from his honeymoon, but before saying you can get to work, manager Soo-Aeon So pulls him aside and is angry that Mincheol got married, suggesting she liked him. Sang-Yu responds by saying that it was unexpected because Mincheol didn't seem interested in girls. 33-year-old Soo-Aeon's past is now summarized. She was seen as a child genius and just wanted a moderately okay guy. As she climbed to success, she remained single. She is annoyed that she can't find a decent guy. Then she realizes that this decent guy she wanted was Mincheol, but her dreams 1049 of marrying Mincheol are now shattered. All she can do now is consult with the Sang-Yu who went to university with her and is the quote-unquote company cupid. After work, Sang-Yu and Soo-Aeon follow Mincheol home to check if he's really married. Then they see Mincheol talking to a girl on the street just to see an angry Gia smoking. Gia is angry because Mincheol didn't call her when he was coming home late because she waited for him to eat dinner. Sang-Yu and Soo-Aeon are skeptical that Gia is the type of girl Mincheol is interested in. Mitchell